With a brand new Star Wars game on the horizon, Ubisoft needs all the positive press they can get, and they're just not doing a good job at that as of late, from executives touting how gamers need to get comfortable with not owning their games, looking forward to a subscription-driven future, to the fact that that kind of future is already pretty grim from Ubisoft's own endeavors, like the way they shut down The Crew, and beyond that, actually decided to strip people's licenses of The Crew, making it impossible to kickstart fan servers and the like, which highlights how grim it is to realize a future where you don't own your games, where everything is digital, where at any point licenses can get stripped from you, and in turn companies can essentially at any point push a button and steal your games, which is why a movement called Stop Killing Games has taken flight, where it essentially guides you through how you can contact various government officials and legislators across the globe to bring up this issue. And I do have an update on that front. In the UK, this movement has actually been making some headway. There's actually a petition being raised to the UK government that has gained quite a bit of traction. And the thing about the UK is that if a petition, a government petition, gets over 10,000 signatures, it will be considered by the government. The government will respond to all petitions that get more than 10,000 signatures. And then if we manage to push this even further, where it reaches 100,000 signatures, if the issue becomes that big, then the petition will be considered for debate in Parliament. The fact that it got to over 10,000 signatures means that at the very least, the government will have to look at this issue. Whether they'll take it seriously or not, I guess we'll see. But the UK is known for some of the best consumer protection laws, or being proactive about that kind of stuff. So maybe there is hope there. And maybe this movement will actually lead to some results that will force companies to ensure that when a game is decommissioned, it is on some level accessible to players, instead of that stuff being taken from players, instead of access to products that people bought being stripped from them. And then beyond that, we have Star Wars Outlaws itself, whose quality is yet to be determined. I think personally that, based on the trailers that I've seen, the game could be really cool, but the way aspects of its launch is being handled has got people rather upset. And a combination of all of these things has the trailer seeing significantly more dislikes than likes. It's actually overwhelmingly disliked, with over 159,000 dislikes and only 38,000 likes as of the recording of this video. The likes to dislikes ratio has plummeted since last time I talked about this, and one of the reasons Star Wars Outlaws is being panned is because of its online connection requirement for the physical edition of the game. Even if you get the disc, you are required to connect to the internet at least once to download a day one patch that will make the game accessible before you're able to play it offline. And what that means is that years down the line, if you have the game uninstalled and decide one day you want to play it again, you want to revisit old times, but servers go down, or the game is no longer supported, or some licensing issue occurs, and there's no way to access that required day one patch that allows the game to be playable, then this physical version of the game becomes useless. It becomes paperweight, just as The Crew did when licenses for that were revoked and servers for that were shut down. So yeah, Ubisoft, good luck getting people to feel comfortable not owning their games, when right now you're being Exhibit A for why people should feel completely uncomfortable about not owning their games. And speaking of content you cannot access, another aspect of Star Wars Outlaws that's raising a lot of eyebrows and that people are seeing as something kind of scummy is the fact that if you spend $70 on the base version of the game, then there will be some content you'll be missing out on. Aside from the fact that you'll get to play the game 3 days late, there is this season pass that details a mission that is exclusive to those who spend more than $70. So there's 2 DLCs I'll release after launch, and that will be included as part of the season pass. And then there's the Jabba's Gambit exclusive mission that is available at launch. This is not DLC that is still in development. This is content that's readily available that is purposely being excluded from the full-priced $70 edition, so you have to pay $110 or $130 to access this one particular mission. It's already bad enough that there's this trend of locking cosmetics behind paywalls and editions and pre-orders and the like, when once upon a time, all that stuff you would unlock through gameplay, like how you can do that in Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man 2. But once you start paywalling content that does impact gameplay, once you start cutting out missions that should be included in the $70 package, given that is the full price of a full-fledged AAA video game, that's where we start to cross some lines where if we let this stuff slide, it could only get worse years down the line when they decide that they can push the boundaries of this thing a little bit further every time. Now, Ubisoft has gotten wind of all of the backlash surrounding this situation, especially the aspect of this one Jabba's Gambit mission being locked behind the paywall of a higher edition. Some people just don't want to pay $110 for a single video game, and some people do want access to all the side missions that are readily available because they actually want to do all of the quests and they want to see all the content surrounding a game. Ubisoft had a response to give when reached out by various news outlets, including IGN. Scrolling down, you'll find that response. IGN details how the revelation of this locked mission sparked a backlash, with some players criticizing Ubisoft's decision to lock a mission behind a season pass for what is a full-priced, single-player-only game. And the statement Ubisoft issued is, to clarify, Jabba the Hutt and the Hutt Cartel are one of the main syndicates in Star Wars Outlaws and will be part of the experience for everyone who purchases the game, regardless of edition. The Jabba's Gambit mission is an optional, additional mission with the Hutt Cartel along Kay and Nyx's journey across the Outer Rim. This mission will be available to those who purchase the Season Pass or an edition of the game, which includes the Season Pass. There's that word that companies love to rely on, optional, as if to say it's not that important, except, well, anything is optional in a video game. Any side mission you include, any content you include in a video game is optional. You could extract any piece of content from any video game and say, well, that's an additional optional thing. You look at a game like Baldur's Gate 3, and a significant majority of that content is optional, but what makes the game feel so full and substantial and replayable is the fact that there's all this optional content out there that some players may never encounter, but others will. But that means that there's so many options and ways that your gameplay session might play out, that looking for all of that optional content is a big part of why people stay for the experience. Especially when we're talking about an open world game like Baldur's Gate 3, or in this case, Star Wars Outlaws, where the optional content fills the rest of the world and is what makes this sort of a non-linear experience and is what people seek out when they kind of decide to go off the beaten path. Hell, some of my favorite content ever in gaming has come from optional content. And then there are games like, Skyrim, where the main quest is like almost the least interesting part, and I completely forgot about it and just kept doing side quests because that optional content was the most compelling part of the game. Just because it's optional doesn't mean it's insignificant. And if this optional content is in fact insignificant, then why the hell are we locking it behind an edition that is $40 more than the already $70 full-priced edition, the base game that should be a complete experience? And then if it is substantial enough to justify the locking of this mission behind an edition that is significantly more expensive than the $70 base price, then you're admitting that you have significant content that you've decided to extract from the complete experience so you can sell back at a premium, despite the fact that that content is already, well, it's already made. It's already ready, cooked, and good to go, like a slice of pizza from a pie that you've decided to take out and then sell separately as if it were an additional item when all you did was take something from the original pie. The optional excuse is also something that Ubisoft likes to apply to microtransactions, be it time savers, which are essentially accessibility features that should just be toggleable, that are instead paywalled, or cosmetic microtransactions that, yeah, maybe doesn't significantly impact the core gameplay experience, but there is an emotional investment that people have with making their avatars and characters look the way they like and express themselves through cosmetic customization that gets lost when that content is locked behind a paywall or is not readily accessible and unlocked through the gameplay experience. Like, one of the coolest aspects of Marvel Spider-Man 1 and 2 for me was unlocking all those costumes and getting to switch back and forth between them at my leisure and just feeling a certain emotional attachment to my character and, kind of dressing him up based on what my mood was that day. And that did, on some level, affect my experience with the game in a positive way. That element is kind of being stripped away just because that stuff's being labeled as optional. But just because it's optional doesn't mean it doesn't have some kind of impact. Which is why stripping away content that is technically optional doesn't mean that it won't make us feel like the experience isn't complete, or like it's missing something, or like it could have been greater had all of the content been included as part of the gameplay experience. And once the content being stripped becomes full-fledged missions, not conveniences or not cosmetics, but actual content that you could be engaging with had Ubisoft not decided to pull off this scheme. We're talking about a story mission in a video game whose core focus is story missions. That's where things get completely unacceptable. And even if this mission turns out to be pretty tame and not a huge deal in the grand scheme of things, that only means that they're kind of essentially giving you less value for the $40 extra that they're charging for with the addition that is required to access this mission. And if it is substantial, then it ultimately means that people who only decide to pay $70 are getting screwed out of something substantial. There is no framing of this situation that looks good, no matter how substantial this mission is or isn't, especially when you consider the possibility of what could happen if an endeavor like this succeeds, where it's no longer just one little mission that gets locked behind a paywall. It might be multiple missions, and some of these might include some of the best rewards and content, or some of the most coveted stuff in the game, or some special little Easter eggs that they might decide to say, hey, only if you pay $110 can you access this content down the line. Keep in mind how far we have come since horse armor as far as microtransactions are concerned. I don't want things to be pushed that far with this whole scheme of locking missions behind higher editions. This practice needs to be eradicated before it has any chance to fester. And look, Star Wars Outlaws is not the first game to pull off something like this, and Ubisoft is not the only company to engage in this kind of practice, but I figure that there's been enough backlash surrounding practices like this where this kind of stuff has been eradicated. But apparently locking missions behind ludicrously more expensive editions has not been stigmatized enough, so here I am calling on people to stigmatize this even further so that it becomes a genuine PR risk for companies to promote stuff like this. We managed to push back on loot boxes to the point where a lot of AAA games now try to steer clear of that stuff. We managed to push back NFTs. Companies are no longer talking about NFTs because they'll get ridiculed to hell and back. Let's do that for shit like this so that companies like Ubisoft will be aware that if they go down that route, they will be ridiculed and they will be called out on it. And rightfully so, especially in a day and age when you've got games like Baldur's Gate 3 that prove that you can make substantial, complete experiences that people will spread word of mouth about if you just treat people the way they want to be treated. If you just stop screwing with people and value the fact that they're placing their trust in you, $70 worth of trust in you, for a product that they hope that, they'll be able to just immerse themselves in without having to think about additional money they have to spend on things that they've been scammed out of. The thing about Star Wars Outlaws is that, to me, it looks like a game with a lot of potential, but any semblance of excitement and positive PR is being squandered by some of the things that Ubisoft has been saying lately, some of the ways that they've been conducting themselves lately, and ways that they've been handling Star Wars Outlaws monetization tactics specifically. They're just shooting themselves in the foot and squandering a golden opportunity to really kind of get people positively excited about a new Star Wars game, one that the Ubisoft developers no doubt worked very hard on, but the potential of the game's success is kind of being diminished by all of these shenanigans that don't need to be. And look, don't get me wrong, it is a Star Wars game. It has the potential to sell gangbusters despite the current backlash, since most of the masses don't pay attention to gaming news and whatnot. But is it worth risking the positive buzz that this game could have generated? And is it worth the marketing risk to lock the one mission behind this $110 edition? Why not just backtrack while you can and just kind of salvage some PR surrounding this game so that it has the maximum potential to commercially succeed? Is this one mission really worth the gambit that you're taking right now of essentially pissing off the masses, pissing off some of the, most hardcore, loyal fans and gamers and members of your community? Or at the very least, that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on Star Wars Outlaws and Ubisoft's response that assures that Jabba the Hutt as a character and faction will be accessible, but Jabba's Gambit is just a single optional mission that you'll be missing out on if you don't pay up $40 extra on top of the $70 that you're already paying for the base game. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.